Hello and welcome. I am Piers Riddyard, CEO of RDX Works, a core developer of the decentralized finance protocol Radix, a public ledger entirely focused on bringing DeFi into the mainstream. Today, I have a roundtable with Matthew Hine, Chief Product Officer of RDX Works, Russell Harvey, Chief Technology Officer of RDX Works, and Adam Simmons, Chief Marketing Officer of RDX Works. We are all here today to talk about the year that has been 2023. And we're going to go month by month. I know that a lot of the stuff happened for activity on top of Radix towards the end of the year, but we are going to start at the start because a lot happened over the course of this year. So join me in a journey down memory lane as we review what happened in 2023. So starting in January, just so that you guys have got this in your heads as to what was happening then, the total market capitalization of cryptocurrency surpassed $1 trillion. In January, and Bitcoin's value sat at $21,000, which seems like a distant memory right now, where we're sitting for Bitcoin. And what also happened was Radix headed to CES in Las Vegas. We had our first grants cohort 1 announcement. That's when we announced that AlphaDex, Caviar 9, Photon, Hermes, OsciSwap, and XRD domains were all going to be part of our first grant cohort, and the Scrypto Developer Incentives Program also got launched then. So Adam, tell us a little bit about Radix at CES.
So CES we did a bit differently this year. We had a bigger booth space, really just to get attention to the fact that Scrypto is up and running. So we've been to CES a few times. It is a great event because it's basically for most of the general tech world where you get seen. And one of the interesting things for CES for crypto is that every single year we've seen it basically grow, and there've been more crypto things going on, including during the bear market. And there's a surprising overlap, especially for kind of industry participants outside of kind of Web3. So like Web2 companies looking into Web3, VCs, institutional money and stuff kind of see you there, and you're taken seriously in a way that doesn't happen as much at crypto events, because you're alongside other brands and like, oh, you're here at CES, so you're actually showing something really cool. And there's a few partnership things that have kicked off from that we can't announce yet, but will be coming up. But that's really what CES was all about.
Nice. And grants cohort 1. This was we did a physical event, which was actually amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. It was basically a 3-day event where we got all of the founders together from the different projects, and we did this boot camp where we were looking at how to think about running startups, how to think about product market fit, how to think about tokenomics, how to think about sort of the things that you need to have available to you when you're actually starting to run a real business. The feedback was universally positive for that first grants cohort. Huge shout out to sort of May and her team, who sort of helped put together and boots on the ground and all that kind of stuff. And very, very enjoyable. And obviously we're now starting to see the first of those grant cohorts people go live on the Radix network, which is super exciting as well. Caviar 9's already live. OsciSwaps is already live. XRD domains is coming up. And Photon is coming up as well. And AlphaDex, I think, what's the status of AlphaDex, Adam?
AlphaDex is running on the back end for a couple of things like shard space.
Right.
So they're doing some cool back end integrations.
Right. And so that also takes us into the Scrypto Developer Program incentives launch. So who would like to talk a little bit about that?
I think we got one for Aussie, definitely got one for Public Math Library.
Yes.
For the CTO award. There's another one as well, which I'm blanking on right now. We've done 2 of those. And then there's also, there was Submitting Blueprint Awards, which was really useful for getting people to come in and have a go at using Scrypto. Of course, this was way before it was live. It wasn't even on RCnet at that point. So we were getting stuff there, and also getting involved in the developer program, which was really the first step of like, put something into the world using Scrypto. So we've been seeing a lot of success with that.
And I think that this was really the start of us moving Scrypto development from, hey, build some like cool like example applications, to let's get more serious about building things that are really useful for the people who want to be sort of building on top of the Radix network, and working out ways in which those bits and pieces, those tools, those libraries that are really useful for developers who are trying to build an application, we can sort of recognize that value within the ecosystem and help people get rewarded for things that you wouldn't see like visibly at the top of a product, but become very, very important building blocks for that. So moving into February, we have the introduction of Bitcoin ordinals and ordinal wizards for anyone who was following people like Eric Wall. And we also saw a big hack coming out of MyAlgo's contract, which someone was able to steal $9.2 million and user data as well. On the Radix side, we had Scrypto 101 launching. Betanet V2 went live. Kucoin swapped EXRD to XRD, so for one of the first exchanges, now supporting the Radix token rather than EXRD, and Betanet Android wallet was also released at this point. So let's talk a little bit about Scrypto 101, Adam.
Yeah, so Scrypto 101 is something that has led quite a few people to get their first steps into using Scrypto and has been really the key to delivering a lot of Radix revelations. And one of the things that we've seen time and time again is when someone actually goes and uses Scrypto in the Radix engine, they then see what all the fuss is about. And so getting that first conversion point and easy way through has been really critical to being able to make sure that people get to experience that. And there's a couple of people who are building live dApps today who started off by going through Scrypto 101. And so we've done some updates. It's only recently relaunched, but one of the things that I always use as a really good barometer for whether something is important is when it was offline for a period. When we updated to Babylon, there were many people coming into like the developer channel, into the main channel, being like, hey, when's Scrypto 101 going to be updated for Babylon? And that kind of organic, hey, I want to use this, is a really good kind of barometer for, is this something that's helping people?
And then we also had Betanet V2. So Russ, what did we get with Betanet V2?
Can't remember. I know the headline was we had the Android wallet release, but basically, at my mind, it was Betanet was getting everything going. I can't remember the distinction between Betanet and Betanet V2.
So we migrated.
That was the first time we had like everything all up, so you could hook up a front end and all that. Radix Connect came with Betanet V2, I believe, was the other feature. That was the way for you to have an easy way for you to get a button up on your website that would say like, hey, let me go connect to a user wallet.
Yeah, we went away from the dApp toolkit to the Radix Connect button, and there was also some more things around people being able to get the wallet through test flight. So
it was the other direction there. It was Radix Connect button evolved to Radix dApp toolkit.
Yes, beg your pardon.
It started as just
it became more complete.
Actually, this is
yeah.
Right. It started handling session management for you and that kind of stuff, which was one of these things where we said, why should we make everybody solve this problem independently?
Right. And I think it's sort of like evolved into an incredibly powerful and useful tool for people who are building against, who want to build front ends against dApps. And we've seen sort of a lot of really positive feedback about what that's evolved into.
I remember that being a really cool point, because it was where like before that point, everything had been really totally focused on Scrypto in terms of like, you're really kind of doing, everyone was building Scrypto backend stuff. And it's like, there's like, people were thinking about front ends for sure. And we had people that are excited about it and thinking about different ways of doing it. But this was like the point where like we finally kind of tied the whole picture together of what it looks like to have not just the Scrypto stuff, but like, this is how the wallet interacts with it, kind of establishing the relationship between front end, back end, wallet. Like all of those pieces were in place in the first form, and we were, I think the comment on this month was that the Android wallet got out first, and then iOS came a little bit later, because we were like, we want to get something in people's hands as soon as possible. We were so anxious to be like, we want people thinking about tying this whole thing together, because that big picture is really exciting. It's not just Scrypto. And I remember that being like a really cool point, watching people go, oh, that's what you're talking about with connecting stuff together and all this, and the button and everything. I remember that being really
dApps
fun.
became real at that point, right? As in, like, people could now build like the front end and the back end, and you start to see the first people building the first front ends for their dApps. It was really cool. Mm-hmm. And obviously, KuCoin swapping over was a big thing for us. That was a real test of our integration documentation and making sure that we had like good paths for exchanges being able to switch over to the Radix network. March in the industry, we had another big hack. This one was substantially bigger than the last one. Euler Finance lost nearly $197 million through a vulnerability in its donate function contract. Most of the stolen funds were actually later returned by the hacker, but again, like, you know, this constant beat of hacks throughout the year, we see them so often we get inured to them, but again, the big reason that we built so much of the Radix stack was around making sure these kind of things were much harder to pull off, much harder to achieve, and much harder to accidentally put into your code in the first place. We also unfortunately saw some closures of crypto-friendly banks during this period, Silvergate and Signature Bank, and so like crypto was definitely feeling a little bit under attack in March.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten that whole thing, because that felt especially bad, because it was like you had like Silicon Valley Bank melted down. It just felt like crypto was like, it's like as if it isn't hard enough. It was like it was just the fallout. It was like collateral damage of these bad banking decisions, and it was sort of like, well, and it just so happened those banks were doing a bunch of crypto stuff. Oh my God, seriously?
Right. It is sort of like Operation Choke Point, I think was the name for it for the US government, and generally very, very negative for the industry at that point. However, on the Radix side, RCnet went live, and so Russ, what was RCnet?
Yes, I mean, there was a ton of under the hood stuff, but the big thing was that transaction review, that preview of seeing what is it that I'm going to sign. The first form of it actually went live in the wallets at that point. So this was after the RadFi demonstration. It was kind of, that'd be really cool, but come on, guys, that's smoke and mirrors. That's never really going to happen, right? That's vaporware. So that was the big moment of, nope, you're actually going to get what you saw on stage there at RadFi. You're going to get it in your hand right now. And so even though that was the first version of it, it finally made it real for a lot of people that transaction preview was going to change the crypto signing experience for the user dramatically.
Yeah, and I can remember when that came out, just being able to play with it was so satisfying, because you combine that with the speed of the Radix network, and suddenly you've got the whole thing finishes in like less than 5 seconds, and it just that ability to be able to see everything, just like, oh, it's real, I can do it, I can put my guarantees in and I can do it. It's so exciting. I think there was also a few other things that happened there. There's core API ready for integrators. Personas were introduced in that release, off-ledger data sharing. That we had the sort of metadata up standards update, which allows sort of NFT creators to sort of have a better framework to be able to do things. And so like that felt like we were starting to get on the path to the things that we put in RadFi were actually going into a network that people could go and test. That was really exciting. What do you remember from the reaction from sort of Twitter and the community to the transaction preview sort of going live, Adam?
So it was pretty much contained within the developer community at that point, because we intentionally weren't pushing it too hard, because we knew there'd be a while until people could actually go and download it. And a goal we had, which sounds a bit counterintuitive, but we didn't want users coming and using the developer wallet, because there was still a lot of things that weren't in there for the user flows. It could only work in like on dApps that people have got set up on RCnet, and so they weren't up all the time. So we weren't really pushing it too heavily at that moment. But within the community, I think you can see a shift from developers, as like you did throughout the year, of more and more things becoming real. These are like, oh, it actually is going to do that. And it's like, yeah, it actually is. And that built a lot of trust in people building, from what we saw.
Yeah. So moving into April, another set of hacks. Hackers attacked one of BitTrue's hot wallets and managed to run away with $23 million, going back to the old adage, not your keys, not your crypto. South Korea's crypto exchange was also hit with a hot wallet attack, losing $23 million. That was 23% of its holdings. And there was an exploit on Yearn, where $11.5 million was stolen to an exploiter who found one of the vulnerabilities in their contracts. So again, sort of more evidence that security is a really important problem in crypto that really needs solving. And on the Radix side, we carried down the path of making sure that became real. So big thing for that point was we went to consensus. We had Gate.io and MEXC added perpetuals. Babylon was sort of the first date for Babylon was announced, and we also had the LayerZero announcement. So LayerZero, huge at that point, was actually not so well known. I think that sort of LayerZero has been growing in sort of popularity and visibility over the course of this year, and it's been fantastic to see. Sort of very, very much deserved by the team. But we've been working with LayerZero for a bit of time up to that point. And we'd worked out that LayerZero, we could find a way of making LayerZero work on Radix, and we announced that LayerZero was going to be coming to Radix at that point. Yeah, very exciting month. So let's start off with Radix going to consensus, Adam.
Yeah, so anyone who was there will remember that we had the probably second largest booth in the entire space, which was pretty cool. So Neo had a slightly bigger one by square footage. Theirs was also a circle though, so that makes the area working out the area a bit hard.
It was very difficult to work out like how you entered it. And it had that,
you get funny looks as well if
perspex office thing in the middle of it. That was also really weird.
And yeah, you get weird looks if you try and measure up their booth by like working out the radius and stuff. It's not easy to do by eyeball, but obviously the big thing here was we had a prime location, and the big difference from each of the years that I've been to consensus with Radix was this year we had things to actually show people. So we had all new collateral, we had the full stack announcement after obviously RadFi, but even just like the booklets and stuff we were handing out and talking people through was just so much easier to sell. Like if I go back to 2022 and trying to explain like, Scrypto and the Radix engine are really interesting, this is why it's an asset-oriented model, versus 2023, it was literally on the first page. It was just like, here's the wallet. This is what signing will look like on Radix. Here's why it's possible. And I'd say boldly 100% hit rate. 100% of people you showed that to was like, this is what signing will look like. Do you see why this is going to be better than blind signing? And it was like an instant penny drop moment. The other really cool thing as well was we had projects there. So the first grants cohort had their demo day, and that was also fantastic to see. The big takeaway from that is, as easy as it is for us to pitch Radix at events like that, seeing ecosystem projects telling other people why they built on Radix and because of all the benefits was just phenomenal. So we had some really good pickup there. And one of the things you often don't see from conferences is that a lot of the value comes from being there multiple times or being at multiple conferences. You start seeing people come around and being like, I saw your booth. And like one of the things that I loved from that event was I had 4 or 5 people being like, I saw you last year and I kind of had a look about you, but now you're back this year, I'm going to take a serious look. And that was really exciting. Of course, the downside was that there was less footfall at consensus that year because of a lot of the stuff going on over there. So we're probably not going to do anything at consensus this year because that's gone even further.
I think a big part of that is the US regulatory environment, right? Like the US regulatory environment just makes it so hard for crypto companies in the US to operate in any way. I think that's such a shame because America is an incredible jurisdiction for innovation and growth and like ambitious people doing great things. So yeah, it's very sad.
And consensus showed it as well, because that was for me the barometer of changing market sentiment. So that consensus, I was going into it being like, then it was like FTX had just happened in kind of normal world time, not crypto time. It's like, everyone's going to be like, this is peak bear market. Everyone's going to feel terrible. Everyone's going to be slouched and like depressed. And actually you got there and even the footfall was lower. Everyone was positive pretty much. Everyone was like, there's some amazing stuff going on in this space. This is really cool. I'm excited about this and that. And they could see the future again.
I was really builder oriented. That was the thing that jumped out at me. Like you said, like depth of the bear market, just like nothing but bad news. And so clearly, like, typically at crypto shows, you always have those people going around that are basically kind of like prodding. They're like, hey, when's your token price? Like all those people were gone. They were hibernating, dead, whatever. Like they weren't at the show. But it was just full of people that were like, I don't care. I'm building something. And it always felt like all of the building activity, like it felt like a turning point where previously it's like all of the kind of building activity was mostly on Ethereum. It was sort of like there were, people were kind of into some other ecosystem, but it was pretty much just like there was the Ethereum community and they were building stuff. This felt like the first point where it was sort of like, okay, building Web3, building DeFi is a generalized thing, and you had a bunch of people that just cared about, like, I want to build my thing. I'm trying to find the right platform to build that thing on. I'm looking at EVM, I'm looking at non-EVM, I'm looking at different options. I'm trying to find something that matches kind of what I'm trying to accomplish. It was very like workman-like. There were just a bunch of conversations we had with people. They're just sort of like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Tell me what your platform can do, and let me see if that's a good match for it. And it felt like everything after that has been in that direction. It like finally feels like crypto is getting very like, all right, we got to actually get stuff out there. It's less speculation oriented and more like I'm trying to solve a problem. Like this was even later in the year with at Token 2049 in Singapore. It felt so much like that.
Yeah,
just people trying to build cool stuff.
It's like instead of so many crypto conferences before this year, it was like, let me explain the token economics to you, rather than like, let me explain the product to you.
Right.
This year very much felt like, let me explain the product to you and why the product is needed in the market. Like, what's the problem I'm solving? It felt much more like the kind of startup conversations that you expect will lead to something that's actually, valuable and useful.
Mm-hmm. You also saw there was a big shift Matt reminded me of with talking about like EVM is previous years. It was like you get people to agree like, oh, building on solidities, but like solidity isn't working for me. Like it's problematic. There's all of these sort of steep learning curves. The idea that the EVM wasn't the only solution was completely different. So 2022 was so many people, as soon as you're like, oh, are you EVM compatible? Was like question number one. And when you're like, no, we're purposely not, you could see a good percentage of people being like, oh, that's a choice, to put it politely. Whereas this year it was like, oh, are you EVM compatible? And the first few times you're pitching it, you're like, oh God, here we go again. You're like, no. And they go, oh, thank goodness for that.
Right.
Was like actually the genuine response from more people than not. So it's shifting of narrative and also people really looking at the problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then moving into May, we had the sort of BRC20, the Bitcoin standard for a Bitcoin-based ERC20-like token, started to take off, much to the chagrin of many a Bitcoiner. So there's sort of like the real, I'd say, the meta wars of Bitcoin started to emerge here, where you got the Bitcoiners who don't believe anything but Bitcoin should be on the ledger, and the people who are like, well, no, we need fees to be able to pay for security of the network, and that was really interesting. And the Pepe craze went off. We had a 370% increase in Pepe during that period, which hit a $1 billion market cap for a meme token. So that was May from the crypto point of view. And then Radix, we announced the Radix Builders Pledge, and we announced the Babylon Boosters Grant. So Adam, can you talk a little bit about the Babylon Boosters Grant?
So Babylon Boosters was primarily about how could we coordinate a marketing and support system for people wanting to go live early on Babylon. So one of the things we knew is that when Babylon goes live, people want to use things, obviously. And as much fun it is as staring at your wallet and sending tokens between different accounts and being amazed at the transaction preview, dApps are what really make networks interesting and accessible. And so the Babylon Boosters meant that we could support projects who had viable MVPs on RCnet and get them to go live within a set period of time, and also coordinate a marketing campaign around all of those different projects going live to build some momentum. And that's been a big focus that I'm sure we'll touch on when we get round to the Babylon launch in the year recap.
Right. And then there was also the Radix Builders Pledge. And the Builders Pledge is basically a set of ethical guidelines and rules that feel like they are important and necessary to put forwards around how you behave, how a company behaves, how a project behaves with what they do. Because I think that there's so much in crypto, like crypto from the outside world is constantly labeled as a scam. And to sort of move away from that and professionalize the industry and make people sort of really think about what they're doing long term, we sort of put out a set of guidelines and rules that we think projects really should subscribe to when they're building, to make sure that we're building an industry in a way that is actually can actually make it into the mainstream. It isn't just the kind of applications you build, but it's the nature of the way that you behave whilst you're building those applications. Moving into June, we had some interesting news. Do Kwon was caught and jailed during June. BlackRock started to really push deeper into doing a Bitcoin ETF. Still hasn't been approved. We saw another hack, multi-chain this time. That was a crazy hack, and another reason that bridging, right? Bridging is such a delicate topic in crypto, and another reason that I'm so bullish and excited about LayerZero coming to Radix is that multi-chain bridging is, if done wrong, is such a honeypot. $125 million got stolen by the multi-chain hack, and $100 million were taken from the Atomic Wallet users. And that's also been linked to the North Korean Lazarus hacking group. So sort of more hacks, more exploits, more proof that security is so important in crypto, and building on sand is going to end up with problematic applications, whereas building on solid rock like you can in Radix, that is what this is all about. Making sure that foundation is there and the foundation is solid. On the Radix side, we had the RunsOnRadix program announced. We had Cerberus peer-reviewed. So Cerberus finally got published in an academic paper, JSIS, with help from the University of California, Davis. Hacken, the auditor, started supporting Radix builders at this point, so that people could go and get audited their Scrypto smart contracts. And the Babylon network upgrade was finalized date for the 27th of September. So let's talk a little bit about the RunsOnRadix campaign, Adam.
Yeah, so this was launched right at the start of the month and had been worked on for a while, and was really going to become, and has become, a pillar of activity we do as kind of the foundation to promote things building within the ecosystem. Because what is integral to this is that Radix isn't the thing that's going to draw people in. No one is like, hey, I want to use Radix, just in the same way as no one's like, hey, I really want to use my BT internet today. Or, oh, I really, to go further down the stack, I really just want to load up Chrome. No, they want to go and visit a website. They want to go and do something. And there's a really famous example, for probably everyone watching will know this, Intel Inside, where Intel as the CPU wasn't something that most people knew. And actually, before the Intel Inside campaign, it was like households, if you ask them, only about 20% of people knew that Intel was a brand and something that even mattered when you looked at getting a computer. Right. Within a few years of Intel Inside being their main marketing push and being put on all these partner brands, it was above 80% awareness of Intel as a brand. And now that gives a lot of power to something which is kind of hidden behind the scenes, ideally, as being, hey, this is what you can expect. And that also allows us to coordinate marketing around what we're doing with ecosystem projects, along with the core technology, that when you see RunsOnRadix, that means that you can expect certain things. You're not going to have blind signing. You're not going to have to be anywhere near as concerned around hacks and exploits. You can expect a simple logging system. You can expect personas. All of that can get wrapped up into a neat little box. Now, obviously, we're in the early days of that, and over time, that gets reinforced in audiences and user kind of feeling towards products, and works both ways. So at the start, It's a way for us to really give a lot of validity to things building on Radix. But down the road, it comes the other way of people go, hey, Radix is here, and it becomes a selling point for the network and the ecosystem as a whole from the individual dApp side.
And on the Hacken side, obviously, Hacken has also been the auditor of the Radix protocol, which we'll be covering sort of that audit later. But at this point, how long have we been working with Hacken, Russ?
Are we in May right now on our month
June.
tracker? We're in June. So we started in early April, so we're at least 2 months point of the hackathon, the first hackathon at this point.
Yeah.
So they've gotten their head around how things work at this point.
And what was your experience at that point with Hacken?
I mean, absolutely tremendous. There was a lot of skepticism going in on, can anybody reasonably take a completely novel model of operation, this completely new design that's unique in the space, and come in and understand it and meaningfully, I attack it meaningfully, look at the pieces and look at the design and tease it apart, look where the flaws are. And Hacken's lead auditor just absolutely blew us away with he's just this incredibly insightful, incredibly patient, learning, goes in, thinks about things, comes back with, here's the things I've thought about. And we had so many conversations where we'd go, the thing that we had talked about in design and all the attack services we were talking about and those sort of things, he would go look at the code for a day, run some testing, then come back and go, I have the following thoughts about this. I'd be like, go back to our design notes, and we're talking about the same sort of stuff. So it really was a terrific experience with them. We have, we ended up at a place of very high mutual respect when we started from a place of very much mutual skepticism, I think. So
yeah, I mean,
by that point, we're both like, hey, we both know what we're doing on both sides of the table.
I think Russ is there was also just generally about audit. You had a lot of skepticism about how much an audit company could actually really find, considering sort of the size of the tech stack and the sort of like the complexity
and the novelty. Is just most audits work on the basis of, I've done stuff like your code before, I know what to look for, right? And of course, when it comes to crypto primitives, Hacken has done a ton of it. So that was sort of where it started was, oh, you have a novel serialization thing. This is a place that has bugs, right? Oh, you have, okay, it's a validator set with DPoS. So let's talk about that. Like all that sort of stuff. Those same core things were there, but our approaches for solving the problems were completely different than everyone else's. So I was very worried that we would come in with, kind of recommendations that were very other network centric or EVM centric or something like that. And we'd be sitting there going, that's not at all how it works. But I was very happy to be proven completely wrong on that. And instead we got very insightful commentary and a good sense check for all the decisions that had been made leading up to it. And then a good rigorous testing of what had been implemented at that point.
Yeah, no, great productive partnership on both sides. And I know that they've also been working with a lot of the community projects as well. And I know the community projects have found that very helpful too. So now moving into July, in the industry, we saw the launch of WorldCoin with their iris scanning orb, the orb of utopia / dystopia, depending on which side of the fence you are. We also saw another set of exploits. This time, $61 million was stolen from the Curve Finance trading pools. And we saw a social engineering attack this time on the crypto payments provider CoinsPaid with a loss of $37.3 million. So lots more hacks and exploits. On the Radix side, we saw RCnet, both RCnet 2 and RCnet Phase 2 go live. And main headline here was Scrypto feature complete. So Russ, if you can talk a little bit about RCnet 2 and RCnet V2 Phase 2.
Yeah, so RCnet V2 was phased and we kind of did a backend release, and then a couple of weeks later you got the associated tooling, like the new wallet, the new gateway, and the like. The big thing was, as you mentioned, Scrypto got padded into place. Particularly, there was a refactor of how the authorization model worked to try to address. We back up a little bit. There's a software development tendency that you see a lot of places that I constantly fight against, which is to make everything possible but nothing easy, right? I constantly see companies making this mistake. In crypto, it's an almost universal thing where they just kind of go, I don't know, code whatever you want, do as you will, sort of thing. And you want to make sure that what are the important things, what are the critical use cases or the user experiences, and make sure that those 90% cases have an obvious and correct way to do them. You want to be a little bit dogmatic about this is the intended way of doing things by presenting an easy path to do the things that are the way you believe they should be implemented. And so we had a problem with authorization where it was completely open-ended and flexible for all these very complex use cases of, I've got an organization with, an org hierarchy, and I want to have all these kinds of different role assignments and rules and all that. And it was perfectly flexible. And yet the overwhelming majority at current level of crypto maturity is, it's kind of like I'm an admin or I'm not. in the most cases for when it comes to authorization stuff. So he said, we're skipping the 90% case in favor of making everything possible. So we came up with the idea of this owner. You can assign an owner role. And this easily covers the 90% case where you just kind of say like, look, I'm the administrator of this thing. This means that I can change the metadata and I'm the one who has access to the privileged method that lets me, withdraw the money that has been collected in its operation, stuff like that. If you want that simple model, it is now available as kind of a one-liner sort of thing where you can just set the owner role. So that was let me just the big backend changes.
Quickly talk about that a little bit, just like for context, wider context. Authorization models, or the authorization model in crypto, is one of the things that often, when implemented badly, and it often is implemented badly, that leads to these hacks and exploits as a result of things like permissions escalation and stuff like this, where you're seeing a lot of these. If you go through, we have on the Radix blog, as a series called the Rect Retweet series. And if you just look at the Rect Retweet series on the blog, REKT, you will see a large majority or a decent number of those hacks as a result of bad permissioning within smart contracts. And it's one of these things that, as Russ is saying, when you design systems naively, you don't think about how you want sort of very granular roles and responsibilities within a system, that as a system gets more complex, it becomes very important. And, often the difference between enterprise software and like startup software comes down to roles and permissions. Almost more than anything else is like, you can do the same thing in a piece of like, startup software as you can in a piece of enterprise software, but the enterprise software has got all of these ways in which it thinks about roles, permissions, checkers, validators, all of this kind of stuff. And so if you actually want to map real world stuff in a way that works for very large scale, very complex systems, and I'm talking all the way up to like sort of governments, network states, all of this kind of stuff, your permissions model, your auth model, sits right at the heart of all of that, like governance around smart contracts, governance around DAOs, governance around voting, governance around like permissions to do stuff. Like this all comes down to the auth model. So while it's a very boring, dull topic for most people to think of, it also such a critical foundational piece. And this is why you can end up in these situations where everything is possible but nothing is simple. And so you then need this way in which you can have essentially a piece of software that feels easy for a startup to use, but also can be sophisticated all the way up to an enterprise use case. And this is essentially the philosophy. If I'm paraphrasing for you, Russell, please jump in and tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, I like the way I say it better, but you go on.
Yeah, this is why it's important. This is why it matters.
Yeah. So that was something we'd wrestled with from a long time. In fact, the auth model is the thing that underwent the most change from the initial design of how Babylon was going to work. I think that was the third major revision to it, and we finally felt that we got it right. There's definitely it's one of those areas that it needs a lot of documented examples. And this is part of the effort we're doing right now, is getting into, you have to expose all the power of it carefully so that it's not overwhelming to someone all the different ways that you can use it. So the other thing for RCnet v2 that I didn't want to skip over related to security is we had Radix off-ledger authentication. Rolla was released with some tooling around that. And that was the missing piece for, you had so many use cases of developers wanting to, I want to verify something about this user, that they own something, and they kept trying to go like, so how do I get them to do a transaction to do this, right? And the whole point was you needed a system to say, there's no need to do a transaction. If you're doing something like, I have my ticket to the concert is on my phone, or that ticket's on Ledger, it's not reasonable to expect that the ticket taker is going to go have someone submit a Radix transaction to go approve that. So how do you get this off-ledger system to validate those things without having to have some kind of network action? And Rolla enables that. And that was, I think Matt will probably be the best to talk about it, but a lot of brain cells were burned in the effort of coming up with how Rolla was going to work. And it was one of these things that coincidentally, as we were doing this, there's a lot of documentation on passkeys was coming out. And we're going, and these are, I mean, passkeys is that Apple, Google, Microsoft are the three main contributors. And I want to say, obviously, many more heads than the ones that we applied to were thinking to it. And it was clear they were coming to the same conclusions. So it was kind of like, hey, we've independently come up with the same system that others have, except for we like ours better, because at the end of the day, you have this nice decentralized store for where the credentials are, whereas the other solutions go down to ultimately I've got like iCloud backup if I want to use it. And if somebody socially engineers someone to get my password ever, it's like I've lost everything. You still have this centralized control over the ultimate secret, which you don't have on Radix.
Roll is a classic Radix thing where you had if you take a kind of like the open-ended, well, anything is possible on the network, you figure out how to do it approach that most crypto networks serve. This is solved with, like you said, you either solve it with you like, well, you do a transaction that kind of creates the proof that you're looking for, or you just do like a blind signing. It's sort of like, all right, the application just like composes some payload, pushes it to MetaMask, and if you sign that, I know that you've proven this thing, but the user doesn't really know what they're signing. It's, it could be something you actually don't want to have happen. So like it opens up all these, it's like, yes, it is possible to technically achieve this, but there is no purpose-built solution of like, what is the right way of really proving that you own an account or you own an identity or something like this? And so we started from that angle and ended up with this system that kind of had the usability profile of a centralized system, but was a decentralized solution, which is like often what we're doing and stuff.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And I it's one of those like hidden powers of Radix that I'm going to say is like latent for a bit. It's one of those ones that as you get more real world implementations of the uses of the network, you're going to increasingly see the power of having Roller present in a way that can sort of be used, ticketing events, point of sale terminals, all this kind of stuff that you actually want a way in which you don't have to rely on a reliable internet connection at all times to be able to do certain things. Next we have August. August, often a quiet, normally a quiet month, but there's never a quiet month in crypto. We ended up having PayPal launching a stable coin in August. We had the Fed start a new program to oversee crypto activities in US banks, and we had the court rule in favor of Grayscale regarding an exchange traded fund application. I actually think this might have been one of the turning point moments for the year. This was when things started to feel like we might be coming out the other side. Really interested, like people started to go, oh, Bitcoin ETF's coming, and I think that sort of drumbeat has just continued all the way through to December where we are now. On Radix, we had the final update to the Olympia public network was released to the node runners. This was the point in which Babylon became inevitable. And we also saw RCnet V3, final RCnet went live. Russ, tell us a little bit about RCnet V3.
And really, that was the last public test network. So it was really just a place to prove out the last few things. Most of it was under the hood stuff. We did it finally had an answer to a problem that had been brought up by the developer community all the way going back to the first release of Alexandria, which is it's hard to unit test stuff in Scrypto. We had kind of an integration testing framework, but there was no way to do practical unit testing without doing more work than you wanted to for your unit testing. And so we released the unit testing framework. So now people have basically two options. They're doing their testing. They can look at the individual items with unit tests, or they can do integration testing with Scrypto. Still more to come there, but that was a big milestone to make it easy to set things up so that you could rigorously test your code before you deployed it.
So final testing, final polish, Babylon well in sights. So that takes us through to September, where we have another hack, this time $41 million from stake.com. We had the Thodex cryptocurrency boss jailed for 11,196 years for fraud.
I missed this one. How did I miss that someone got jailed for 11,000
years? It does feel
slightly
overkill, 11,000 years in prison.
I think it was per instance of fraud.
Right.
He was given a jail term.
They take fraud seriously in Turkey. Huh?
So yeah, that was I remember the headline mostly for how many years. I was like, wow,
that was a clever judge to give out that sentence. That got some press.
Yeah, another example of not your keys, not your crypto, and also sort of the dangers of using centralized exchanges. On Radix, we had some exciting stuff start to come for the wallet. iOS and the Android wallet were approved for the App Store, which meant that we were then had the green light to be able to put them live when Babylon came around, and we'll talk a little bit about the fun that is getting apps approved for the first time. We also
I still have that email saved, the email from Apple that we've got approved. I still have
it's a piece of history.
I
mean, honestly, let's talk about that a little bit now that you've opened the box. And let's be clear. After that first one, the turnaround time became very reasonable for Apple. But there's this: if you've never submitted anything for Apple for review, the process is completely opaque. I mean, they purposely don't tell you anything about it. It's been a problem since the dawn of the App Store. I'm just sort of like, we have a few rules. We choose to write them very broadly and interpret them selectively, sort of thing. But basically the answer is what we decide goes, is the reality of it. And submitting a crypto wallet at a time when, again, in not crypto timescales, in normal human industry timescales, all they're hearing is like scams, SEC action, yada, yada, yada. And then it does, but here's a brand new novel crypto wallet for you guys to review. And that was quite a terrifying time, because basically you just have these gulfs of no response whatsoever. And then there's just this very generic violated terms of store, rejected. So definitely getting across that first one, when we had that approval, it was this, there's the utter disbelief, like you're rereading it 7 times. Wait, is this one of the alpha ones? This is the production channel that I see approval on. Like, we could go click it and it goes live in the store.
Like, we didn't get the opaque rejection. It's like, all right, we got to figure out what's wrong. It was just sort of like, it took them a while, but then it was approved. You're like, all right. I guess we did the right things.
Because Russ was militant about this. Like, Russ was just like, we have to get a version of the wallet in the hands of Apple as soon as possible. And like, it was the only thing that he was really pushing for as the earliest thing we were getting. And so like a lot of the stuff we were doing was just around making sure that got in, because I don't know if people followed the Uniswap app approval with Apple, but it took them, I think, 6 or 9 months from when they wanted to launch. So they'd already been doing work before, but 6 to 9 months after they actually said that they wanted to launch, I remember going to their booth at Consensus and they were like, we have an app. And I'm like, can I download it? And they're like, no. But here's the version of it running on this phone and you can play with it. And so it was, yeah, that was a huge moment. And I think huge credit to Russ and the team for really threading the needle on that as well. And that felt like one of the biggest hurdles, that one of the biggest unknowns, one of the biggest things that we were worried about, like network going live and people not, us maybe only having to go live on Android and not have iOS available, and having no way of knowing what sort of time frame that would look like. That was huge internally for us. We also had the Radix wallets then launch at the end of September, which was when Babylon went live. September, huge month. Babylon went live right at the end of September.
You kind of buried the lead there with the wallets went live.
Oh, and then also the network. Yeah.
And then also the network.
The Babylon upgrade happened too. Some other stuff.
I mean, that was incredible. That was an incredible moment as well. Like, my memory just sitting both on the streams, the internal streams, and on the streams with sort of the community, and that moment when the switchover started, and then you're like, is it going to work? Is it going to work? Is it going to work? It's going to work. It'll be fine. It'll be fine.
We had tested it so exhaustively, including with the community test, that I was surprisingly not worried. Like, I wasn't sitting there very anxious. It was more just sort of, we're sitting there in the war room, stuff's ticking over at about the predicted timelines and all that. And I think at no point did anyone doubt it was going to work. The concerns were mainly around like, is there something we're going to have to frantically debug that was unexpected with some of the validators or something like that? So definitely it was a lifetime memory when we finally, hey, we've had this quorum receipt. Yep, it's been accepted. This is the second one's been accepted. We're going, this kind of then going back to Telegram and watching people realizing the network was now up and all that was, it was cool.
Yeah, I always envision it like the Apollo launch control room, but this seriously was like that. It was just you have these bunch of people. There's like each person has their role. It's like, okay, like it was like, okay, we now have connection, we now have consensus, we now have this. It's just like, the green lights coming down as we're like, all right, we practiced it so much that it was like no one had any doubt, but it was just like the steely-eyed rocket men of the operation room was really cool to watch. And this is another thing that I've saved. I've got the screenshot from that. And then of course I was like the stupid one in there is like, hey, I just did a first transaction on the Gumball Club. It's like,
yeah, you have NFT number one, don't you? Or Gumball member number one.
Yeah. Isn't secretly I've got I have the membership card number one in
collector's. Adam, what was your
memory? The company owns that.
What was your memory of the go live?
That'd definitely be Lucas on the live stream with the party popper.
Yeah,
that was. I mean, for me, and I think for a lot of the community, there was more anxiousness because obviously we hadn't seen all. Well, I knew about much of the testing going on, but you don't see it as much. And you're like, I was on the call, and it's like you see just terminal code being printed out, and you're just like, is this a good sign or not? And everyone was like so stoic and just completely calm, and you're like, I'm not sure if this is good or not. Like, please show some kind of emotion. And then it all just started working. Apps went live. People were happy. And I mean, in the run up to it, the thing that surprised me most was we had a really good campaign. That we got that campaign that we were doing on Twitch, and this was actually Ben's idea. And the campaign itself, it's a cool campaign. I don't want to oversell it, but what really stood out for me was when it was being formulated and looking through the list is even someone who's day in, day out, like talking about Radix, talking about all the cool stuff going on. I found myself going through and I was like, shucks, we have got that, haven't we? I completely forgot that was even a thing. Yeah. Developer royalties, that's a big deal. People got really excited about that. And you're like, that just fallen out of things you said, because it's like, it's not that it's not exciting, it's just, it's number like 32 on the list of really cool things about Radix. Yeah. And if you want a 5-minute pitch to someone at a booth, you just don't get round to it sometimes. And so seeing all of those was really, really exciting. And then knowing all the things that were going live, getting to use the Gumball Club, getting to show people the Gumball Club was also a highlight. And it was really lame, but one of my highlights was straight after it went live was sending messages to a bunch of close friends who aren't in crypto and just being like, go to the Gumball Club and download the Radix wallet, and just try it. And that was the first time I've ever been able to get like a non-crypto person and just blindly send them to a let alone an existing network that had been up and running for years, to like a brand new network, a brand new system, and they would work it out themselves. And that is a big moment. Like, you could never do the same thing with MetaMask, ever.
Right. And all of the little pieces that went with it. So like the extent, the Radix Connect, the wallet, the dashboard, the Gumball Club, and then the sort of the easy onboarding, so that you could get a few tokens, so that you could then go and use the network, sort of like self-service, token force it. The number of things that had to go live simultaneously and work all together, it is pretty mind-bending. I think both Russ and Matt have said independently that this is the most complicated launch they have ever done and ever will do in the entire history of their careers. And it went off. Yeah.
And the exchanges came live quickly too, all the integrations with them, that we had good signs that these docs are really good, which is probably the first time exchanges have said that to someone. We had drilled quite carefully to make sure they were actually ready with the kind of questions you can't answer unless you actually have properly integrated and all that. But still, there wasn't like, hey, we're not going to go in front of you and show it to you that it's working on RCnet. We're just assuring you that it's done based on answering these questions. So there was definitely some nervousness at, okay, now it's running and you're going to turn the green light on at some point tomorrow and should work. And then when those things actually did work, that was quite a relief, because of course it's not just the network itself, it's the things around it that people need to use it.
So that sort of leads us into now post Babylon being live, October, November, December. It's all things launching on Radix, things happening. I think, within 7 days we had already hit 5,000 downloads of the wallet, which we were super excited about, just from the point of view of this is real people using it immediately, going out, playing around with it. We had USDC, USDT, ETH, and BTC as wrapped versions on the network via Instabridge really quickly. We had OsciSwap and Caviar 9 go live. OsciSwap got over $100,000 in volume in the first 12 hours of its going live, and then reached 1 million TVL pretty quickly after that. Shard Space Dashboard went live. Astralescent went live. Caviar 9 reached $1 million in TVL shortly after OsciSwap. DeFi Llama started tracking the TVL on Radix. That, again, a lot of work went in the background to make sure that that data could be pulled into DeFi Llama, making sure that the integration points were there, making sure that then the dApps that were launching were integrated correctly so that data could start pulling in. Impala went live. Scrypto 101 returned. We had XRD, USDT, perpetuals contracts go live on Ascendex. And we also saw Dexter launch their MVP order book. So like a bunch of stuff happening in October. First assets going into DEXs and other applications. TVL, already crossing the 1 million mark, and getting integrated into sort of key places that the industry looks at to sort of see visibility. So like from a applications and TVL point of view, really, really great starting point. And much faster in terms of the number of dApps that were live from day one than sort of almost any other layer one protocol that goes live. It normally takes a lot longer for those dApps to come on and people to start using it. So that was super exciting. Adam, what's your sort of like memory of October?
Just constant organic action of things going on, people trying things, and this was always the goal we had. And I think when you hear like 5k wallet downloads within like the first 7 days, is on the one hand you're like, that's a really big number, but then in the realm of big numbers you're like, that's not a very big number,
right?
And it was intentional. We didn't trigger all of the hey, go download the wallet conversion campaigns, big push then, because it was early network. There wasn't much live. Things need like stress testing, any rough edges that need to get kind of smoothed out. This was organic people who just kind of generally were aware that Radix had gone live, coming and trying it, doing transaction on the network, and using the dApps all within the first week. And that feels like a long time. And this is the thing which I often see like within the community, and I get it. Like you want everything to be happening at breakneck speed. You want it to be tomorrow, yesterday. But not only does the network itself need to have that kind of stress testing, people get comfortable with what's going on in it, trying things, using things, but the dApps themselves are startups. They are companies that have not been live before. They have not had all of these systems all working together. And so this first kind of couple of months has been about making sure that people are using it, trying it, getting confident with it, to the point that they can go and tell other people, hey, yeah, I've used this a few times. It works. It does what it says on the tin, which builds that foundation to really take us into 2024 as the year where Radix is getting used.
Right. And I think that's sort of like, going through to November and December. In November, we doubled our wallet downloads. Now we're now at 10,000 wallet downloads. We have Gable Finance V1 went live, AlphaDex went live, Bacchium went live, Caviar 9 reached $10 million of TVL. So if we went from 1 million to $10 million of TVL in a month. Trove went live. Weft Finance went live. We saw Pith Network integrate the XRD USD feed into their systems. And anyone who's following sort of oracles in the space, Pith Network's a really cool oracle that's sort of really focusing on DeFi. DeFi Plaza, improving their liquidity provision system. You saw Relegant oracles go live on Radix. We had Gable Finance go live. We had Delphi Bets V1 go live. We then, by the end of the month, had hit $25 million of TVL on the Radix network. We saw sort of improvements to the Radix charts, more information coming in that they're pulling in from the ecosystem. Now you can see things like the number of smart contracts that have been launched, components that have been put onto the network, sort of the Radix name for smart contracts, as well as transaction volumes, fees burnt, all this kind of stuff. We saw Dexian go live, and just sort of like more things happening. And that sort of followed through to December as well. DeFi Plaza breached the $1 million of TVL. Radlock coming live very soon. BitGet lists XRD. Bybit lists XRD perps. We had super oracles announced, so that we've got sort of like a big oracle provider coming to the Radix network next year. We got our audit back, which I'll be talking about in a little bit. And we also had Atlan Digital also come back with the audit. And so like, I think this sort of like October, November, December period is just sort of this first wave of all of the things that have been waiting to go live. And as Adam says, we haven't pushed the big red button for like really, really trying to get as many people onto the network as possible right now. It's this period, and I've talked about this in my blog post about the 3 phases of the Radix network, is that this is the period where you want all of those things that like people were talking about maybe doing, like launching and then having that feedback and that community support and that iteration period, because the better you can get the things ready for the wave of people that you want to bring to the network, the better that activation is going to be, and the better that you're going to be talked about as well. Because if people come and they're like, yeah, I came, but it was kind of a bit crap, like that's not a good look. But from the point of view of the community, there's all of these things now that people can engage with, that they can give feedback to, that they can put money into, that they can sort of like play around with tokens, that they can improve.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, like these are all like this laundry list of people launching. These are not projects that, you know, we dumped a bunch of incentive money on to be like, okay, we need to get like this and this and this our network, and, you know, come and like try to coordinate this launch of projects. Like these are like, every one of these are projects that care about the thing they're building,
right?
And they chose to launch it here, and they're actually getting it out there. And so it is this exciting period. Like I love the fact that I remember like several years ago, I lamented the point where it's like, there's just no way I can keep up with everything going on in crypto. Like even if it's a full time, you just can't keep up with everything. Now I'm literally at the point now where I can't keep up everything that's happening on Radix. Like we have somebody on our staff now, which is just producing like this weekly summary of like our own ecosystem activity, which is always like, I eagerly read this summary because there's like literally so much going on that I don't just, I would miss a lot of stuff otherwise. So, you know, seeing people that are actually building on the network, that want to be building this thing, and they're in this early phase of like, you know, launching and working through the initial kinks and figuring it out and developing and expanding. And like, it's this really, you know, dynamic, exciting period for the network. That's really cool to see.
Yeah, that's been the thing that I've been, for sure, the last couple of months I've been happiest about, because when years ago now we had said that we weren't going to pursue a strategy of just go pay millions of dollars for the 1 or 2 apps that you want to make sure go live, multiple people told us we were doomed. Like
right.
You'll have it, it'll be dead. Nobody will release anything. Go look at all the every other network. This is how you do it. You go identify 1-2 partners, you dump a bunch of money on them, or you just have an in-house team to it. If you don't do this, you will have no applications. And this wasn't like opinion. This was crypto fact at the time, right, to everybody we were talking to. Like, you guys are out of your minds that you think you can, these things will just appear if you provide, you know, just a good environment for it. And that's not enough. So to see project after project going live, and to see how sophisticated even these very early ones are, where you're getting things that are at the sophistication that is greater than you have on other networks in many cases. These aren't just, oh, I did a exact clone of something that came before in a different network to test the waters. We jumped straight to complex dexes and that sort of thing. It's tremendously exciting to have that exact thing you said, Matt, where it's like, I can't keep up with all the stuff that's launching. I rely upon that weekly roll up to then go, oh, then I go and click through the sites and connect my wallet and play and stuff like that. But that's the best feeling, that all these things, people going, this is a cool place to build. I can realize what I want to do here. And, you know, it feels terrific after years of being told you're a fool.
Yeah, and it was like the big bet that we made on Scrypto and Radix Engine way, way, way back, like before Alexandria, which was basically like, if we can't build Scrypto and Radix Engine, if we can't build those as products that make that happen, that make people actually want to just use the tools because they're better tools, then there's no point in Radix. Like, this is the whole, it was like the big bet of Radix is basically, it's sort of like, you know, like, we're not going to win the game of like getting $200 million and promoting and paying and sort of like creating this expensive Potemkin village of progress. And so like, no, we actually need, like, we believe it is possible to build something that people actually think is better. And if we do that, then people will build on the platform by definition almost. And so this is like the big bet we made. And the reason why we spent so much time with Scrypto before it went on the network was to build up that community, and then seeing it all actually come true with people taking what they built and launching it on a live network and starting to get real money in and everything is like, it feels so good.
Yeah.
Since
and it's just the
Piers
start.
teased it as well, is it's
not,
it's not just kind of startups and things who are getting this kind of wow, look at Scrypto moment. So Piers, for the people who didn't see it in Telegram, you teased something the other day. In the larger entities are also looking at some of these demos.
Right. Yes. No. Yeah. We recently did a demo for a large bank, and the thing that I think is really interesting about financial institutions is that the attitude has shifted so much towards public ledgers. You know, you go back a few years and everyone would be like, well, we have to own the infrastructure. We you know, it's a private ledger. We're going to use R3 Corda, or we're going to use IBM's one.
Hyperledger.
Yeah, I think it's always Hyperledger, because
Hyperledger
promise of
Fabric,
IBM services,
right? Or R3 Corda, and now I think banks are understanding in the same way that you don't need to own the servers to run good infrastructure. You can use AWS or, you know, other service providers. The cloud service providers are available, but that actually is a business advantage, not a business disadvantage. And the same thing is very much coming through now for public ledgers. They're like, oh, the infrastructure, we don't have to worry about the security and the neutrality of the place in which we're building these things. We can just go ahead and use this infrastructure to build financial tools and instruments. And so when we did this demo, we were like, okay, well, let's just show, let's go through and show how easy it is to do the kind of things that you would expect. Let's show you what a bond issuance would look like and how easy it is to administer. But again, going back to what I was talking about before, like your authorization model plus your token model suddenly gives you all of these tools that someone from a bank will go, yep, I need that. Yep, I need that. Yep, I need that. And not just I need it from the point of view of you can issue the token, but I can set that token in an institutional context. And I am sold on the idea of this being on a public ledger. I'm sold on the idea of financial composability of a neutral infrastructure, and being able to sort of like marry those two worlds together and do it. And we really did spend a trivial amount of time on this just because it was just a conversation we were asked to go in and have. And so we were like, okay, let's put something together. We've got lots of other things going on. And I think, you know, Matt, it took about maybe 2 or 3 hours of one of our devs' time to put together the entire
just
demo.
knocking out a little front end. That was,
right.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. And I got to say, like, the community first strategy in our developer community also supports these kinds of engagements that you're talking about with the institutionals, because institutions are always going to look for proof points. It's sort of like, if we're going to make an investment in something, we need to see we don't want to be the first. And so again, if you rewind like a few years ago, it was always sort of like, well, what other big companies are using this? And this is why like Hyperledger and Corda always came up, because like, oh, well, other big companies have their logos and they're doing test developments or, you know, deployments or whatever. But now, I mean, when people are talking about public infrastructure, like you said, it really supports the message. We can say, look, we believe this enables a much, much larger group of people to build much more powerful things. And look, we actually have people doing that. We have a set of people that are building this range of applications already, even though the network launched 3 months ago. That is something that is like, this is now playing with the more institutional types. They kind of go, oh, wow, this is actually real sort of organic attack. It's a real proof point that the tool here is better. And so, those guys always take a lot longer, but like it's synergistic in the end,
and it's all necessary, right? Like it's all necessary. The fully permissionless DeFi first, very like startup friendly ability to build, iterate, and improve, and take on the old world for the new. But then also there is all of these assets that exist in the world that you want to tokenize, that you want to have represented on Ledger, that you need the financial instruments that exist, the financial assets that exist to be represented. So you need both sides. You got to have both sides. And this is what Radix is all about. It's about enabling the developer entrepreneur, the startup person who just wants to get to market quickly and be able to deliver an incredible user experience and not have to worry too much about security, to be able to go and launch their thing so they're not sort of, awake at night with cold sweats about the Lazarus group coming in and hacking their application, at the same time as giving real paths forwards where institutional capital can come in and go, okay, we see these tools, we understand the benefits of public ledger, and we want to come play. And so your strategy has to involve both of those things. And I'm bullish on both. Like the Googles of tomorrow are going to be built on Radix, but those people there's also going to be, the banks that currently exist and have their infrastructure putting their assets here as well. And it's the combination of the two that will start to create the products that are going to push this into the mainstream. So I mean, to roll up, you got 2023 was the year that Radix moved from a bunch of cool concepts to a set of real products. And for me, sort of 2024 is when the real Radix products get real use, and super excited to see what comes in 2024. So with that, Matt, Russ, Adam, do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap up this longer than normal session for the Radix Roundtable 2023 wrap up?
Should have thought of an inspiring quote beforehand, but I'll have to retreat to what Arnold said, right? Don't listen to the no. That's the most important thing. Never would have gotten Babylon shipped if we'd listened to anybody who along the way, it's like all the decisions made, like you'll never achieve that. You'll never get that signing experience. You'll never get developers to come, all those sort of things. If we'd listened to the no, never would have gotten off the ground. We wouldn't have this, the seeds of a revolution for the industry planted at this point.
Yep. Read the crypto is hip hop, and it's going to win because it's hip hop. And we're selling Techniques 1200 turntables. We've got the best turntable. So
I'm going to cheat. I've got two. The first is that in an ultra competitive environment, the difference between first and last is 1,000.1% gains, not one massive thing. So always look for the marginal gains. And number two, I won't name the VC that I heard say it, but there's a major Silicon Valley VC who said some of their most successful portfolio companies, they felt like complete idiots before it all worked out. And I think that's something which, especially in the hyper compressed timeline of crypto, is so important to think. Like even doing this recap here, like looking at the last 12 months of Radix and feeling that momentum gain makes me so excited for what's going to be coming next year.
Right. I think it's so easy to be myopic, but the 2024 it's a full year. And in crypto, that's 10 years. And that's a lot. That's a lot of years for a lot of exciting things to happen. So thank you very much, everyone. And we'll see you the other side of 2023 and 2024.